Scientists of Reddit, what are some scary scientific discoveries that most of the public is unaware of? Many people may be silent carriers for mad cow disease and won't know for another decade or so. Mad cow disease from the 1980s to 1990s was due to cows being fed the remains of other animals. People then ate their beef and consumed prions, a protein that can destroy the human brain. It's thought that many people still might carry prions but won't know until they start experiencing the symptoms of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease or bovine spongiform encephalopathy, which might be 10 to 50 years after consuming the contaminated meat. It has a long incubation period. You can also contract the prions from blood transfusions, which is why so many UK citizens from that time period still aren't allowed to donate blood. Once the symptoms begin, cognitive impairment, memory loss, hallucinations, etc., you usually die within months. There is no cure or treatment. Yup, the Red Cross informed me recently that I can't donate blood due to this. I was a military baby in the 80s. The rep literally said, not to alarm you, but mad cow disease could pop up at any time. Super gonorrhea is resistant to the vast majority of strong antibiotics, including fluoroquinolones and macrolides. Gonorrhea is mutating all the time to resist antibiotic effects. There have been multiple reports of super gonorrhea in Australia, England, etc. Not much more immediately horrifying than antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Prions are so crazy. It's just a malformed protein. Yet, somehow it teaches other protein to fold themselves improperly. The human body has no defense against it. Truly terrifying. And they're generally only detectable through an autopsy of the brain, which means you gotta be dead first. Pineapples have an enzyme that digests protein. So whenever you eat a pineapple, it is eating you back. It's the reason why you have to boil pineapple before embedding it in jello. The bromelain in the pineapple keeps the gelatin from setting. Major solar coronal mass ejection apocalypse. The thinking goes that the big one, when it hits about once every 500 years, if not sooner, would be powerful enough to knock out electrical and communications systems across Earth for days, months, or even years, nixing power grids, satellites, GPS, the internet, telephones, transportation systems, banking, you name it. Edit. Thanks for all the comments. I think the biggest factor here would be the fact that nobody would know what happened. In a fear-fed world, this would lead to rumors and civil unrest very quickly, people running to get guns, food, taking advantage of the chaos to commit crimes, etc. It would be a nasty scenario. Oh yes. The most relevant recent incident was the Carrington Event of 1859. The analog world of the time remarked that some telegraph operators were continuing to send and receive messages after disconnecting the device's power supplies. Today, the disruption would be catastrophic in highly unpredictable ways. Like, for example, what would the results of a toxin pulse into the world environment be like after a billion small electrical fires ignite tons of plastic and solder? The total breakdown of the delivery network would instantly start the 6 weeks to starvation countdown. And then there's the unfortunate fact that the vast majority of people in my country, at least, have no survival skills whatsoever. And the first thing they'll do for answers is reach for their non-functional phones. Motherfucking wall Martians'll be barbecuing their neighbors within the week, you watch. Not a scientist but recently discovered that the rate of which people in my country will get cancer has reached 1 out of 2 people, or basically half the population will be diagnosed with some form of cancer in their lifetime. No one believes me that it's that high when I tell them that, even if I show the actual reports I got this information from. The world has 70% less insects on average than it did 40 years ago. We really are coming up on our silent spring. For the people saying there are less pests, those aren't the ones we're worried about. Insect pollinators are vital to so many crops, we could be facing serious problems with certain food supplies soon. In recent years, China has had issues with apple and pear crops to the point where some regions have had to pollinate crops by hand. Also, insects form lower blocks of many food webs, and their disappearance will spell trouble for higher trophic levels. About 8 years ago, a friend of mine was working on the technology to allow you to feel things through your smartphone. Not just the emotion of anger that you feel every day through Twitter, but the textures of fabrics of clothing you are thinking about buying. He moved to Boston and we lost touch, but I think about his job every single week. Lost touch with him? Somewhere in the world they put two AIs to talk to one another. Before they knew it, the two AIs started talking to one another in a better, more efficient language, but since the developers didn't know what they were talking about, they had to turn them off. First one, the vast overuse of antibiotics has led to superbugs that are antibiotic resistant. At the same time, the diversity of microbes within the human has drastically decreased in first world countries. This leads to a correlated rise in allergies and gastrointestinal diseases. As we use more antibiotics and antibacterial, viral products, then biodiversity of microbes decrease, and superbugs have a much easier pathway of invading the body. With a very biodiverse microbiome, your resident microbes will try to fight off these infections much easier. We need to focus on helping bacteria, not killing all of it. Edit. Hi. I am a biology undergraduate by the way, but I do work in a microbiology lab where I do genetic sequencing and study antibiotic production. I am no expert, but I am in love with microbiome research. For anyone else curious about the subject, I recommend I Contain Multitudes by Ed Yong. It covers the subject in Across the Animal Kingdom and it's actually really fun to read. There are ancient microbes lying dormant in glaciers. As climate change progresses and these glaciers melt, it is possible that we will be exposed to ancient diseases for which we will have no immunity. Source. It's more likely that they'll be too archaic to actually attack us. They evolved to infect single-celled organisms. The source even states this. It'd be like someone from 3,000 years ago in a horse-drawn carriage trying to race a race car. It's possible for the former to win, but it'd require some extraordinary circumstances. That being said, climate change is scary but for other, more significant reasons emo. Abdominal aortic aneurysm. It's basically an aneurysm that happens in the big artery in the middle of the abdomen. It's fine and is usually asymptomatic, but when it ruptures, a patient loses all their blood within a short period of time. The scary part is that it usually is diagnosed by accident due to annual checkups for something else. Anyone can have the disease, but especially people with Marfan syndrome, smoking, hypertensive, and hyperlipidemic. The babies born today will see the world change pretty substantially because of climate change. It may not be fast, it may not make headlines, but the world will look very different when they are retirement age than it does now. Not a scientist, but I will still take the time to mention something that scares the shit out of me I only found about a month ago, and I don't think a lot of people are aware of but probably should be. Back in 1946–58, the U.S. tested 60 nuclear weapons on the Marshall Islands and buried the nuclear leftover waste and soil in a 30 feet deep cavern, sealing it with a concrete dome. The dome is cracking and now it's leaking into the ocean and surprise surprise it's not fixing itself, and the people responsible are essentially ignoring it or saying it is not their problem. Imagine Chernobyl but bigger and in the ocean. The Higgs Boson, which was hypothesized decades ago, was discovered via the Large Hadron Collider. Its real-life discovery proved that it's what gives mass to everything. But there is a non-zero chance that a Higgs boson can drop to a lower energy state. And because of the law of entropy, it's the preferred state to decay to a lower energy state if possible. The influence of a low-energy state boson would kick off a chain reaction causing other Higgs bosons to drop to a lower energy state. The problem with this is that if a Higgs boson drops to a lower energy state, then it can't give mass to things anymore. Which has universal implications when mass doesn't have mass anymore. It's theorized that the infinitesimal small probability of this occurring could lead to a circumstance where the universe as we know it disappears. Essentially it would occur like an absolute void progressing through the universe. Low energy state Higgs bosons infecting any other Higgs boson they come across. Maybe the closest thing to a Thanos snap, but it causes everything to disappear in the universe but only at the speed of light rather than instantaneously. Known link between untreated hearing loss and cognitive decline, i.e. dementia. ETA, key word is untreated. If you previously had normal hearing and it started slipping, please see an ENT and audiologist. Hearing aids have come down in cost and improved in function, aesthetics even in the last 10 years. If you are a veteran in the U.S., the VA will normally cover your hearing aids. If you have had hearing loss since childhood, you're not one of the ones I'm worried about. You have either learned sign language to keep you from being isolated due to your hearing loss and/or you have learned how to use hearing aids, cochlear implants to keep you from being isolated due to your hearing loss. The link is really between communication and cognition, not the physical ability to hear. It's just that in people who previously had normal hearing, if they don't do anything it will impair their communication and in turn affect their cognition. Artificial General Intelligence (AGI). In other words, a digital computer that is superhuman in all cognitive tasks. Humans are imbued by evolution with a sort of general learning algorithm. But it's running in a very slow, biological computer, with low input-output speed, talking, tapping thumbs, reading etc. Once we can implant that algorithm in silicon, a computer chip, there's a good chance it'll be superhuman in a matter of days or less. Sort of on the level of intelligence gap you might feel between you and a mosquito. At that point, it doesn't even have to be malicious to destroy all of humanity. As Max Tegmark has put it, the real risk with artificial general intelligence isn't malice but competence. A superintelligent AI will be extremely good at accomplishing its goals, and if those goals aren't aligned with ours, we're in trouble. The implications of this would be all-encompassing. It would change the whole game. And many top experts believe it could happen within the next 10 years.